Hello, everybody. Well, I'm glad to present a research program we have currently hosted at the National Institute for Typographic Research in INRT, also called the INRT in France. We investigate typefaces created during the 15th century, which are neither blackletter nor fully Roman. So, Halbgotische, Gotico-Antiqua, Fere-Humanistica are the names we encounter the most often. But in fact, there are many more names. No one has really been adopted, so discussions tend often to be vague and confusing. We can encounter Halb-Romanisch, Semi-Gotica, Gotica-Humanist, Gothic pre-Humanistica, Petrarca shift, Roman Gothic, Half-Gothic, Italo-Gothic, Proto-Roman, or more generally, transitional, hybrid, or mixed. Well, to note what is in between, we logically need two extremes, which are then pure Gothic and pure Roman. We have pure Gothic straight with Gutenberg. Until 57, there is only Textura and Bastarda. And writing Gothic had achieved its stable state over centuries, and that gave stable types. What is Roman in return is much more difficult to say, because the movement of the humanists and their aim in writing in the antique manner was a strong input for the type, but yet an unstable script. Further, the humanists rejected the name of Gothic in some way. They blamed the Goths for the downfall of the Roman Empire. So everything which was Gothic was in some way considered as barbaric. Humanism will, of course, go beyond the death of Poggio, mentioned here in 59, but he also wrote the Lettera Antica Renovata around 1400, which is almost half a century before the Germans start to print. So our main story is what the Germans encounter when they export their invention to Italy, which is then a trip from Mainz to Venice. And Germans will also come back, so tried a lot of things before the separation of Roman and blackletter is complete. Gotico-Antiqua will not survive the 15th century. We find the last creation in 1482. But 400 years later, as you know, private presses will make revivals of these types, which give us a sort supplement to the study. So the aim of the study is to clarify an object which is, of course, of difficult nature, but rather than simplifying it, I believe that it should be embraced with its complexity and diversity. Let us look at who has attributed when what name. In 1912, the paleographers Erl and Liebert described the hand of Petrarca as Fere-Humanistica. Then the typographers Gaudi and Updike used transitional, having no equivalent name and type. And finally, the incunabula researcher Alfred Hessel proposes Gotico-Antiqua in 1923, which is then mainly adopted, either within the world of Gothic, as by Johnson, or as an independent form like by Hargreaves. Now, the right name is one thing, the corresponding form another. If we look which form is described as Gotico-Antiqua, we mainly have two types who come up. We find the Rundus type by Peter Schöffe and the type in Subiaco by Swainholt and Pannertz, which are, as we will see, quite different. Gaudi, in his book The Alphabet, had chosen letters by Swainholt and Pannertz. It is, in fact, a rare example to see what he called the transitional form within the history of typography. Today, we are used to this, a clear separation between the worlds, on one side Gothic, on the other Roman, and there's nothing in between. Gerrit Nordsey had proposed in 1970 to weaken up the frontiers. On one side, the upright types, so we find Textura, Rotunda, and Roman, and on the other, the cursive ones, Fraktur, Bastarda, and italic. Now, if Gotico-Antiqua merits a place in general classifications is not really of our concern, but for many 15th century prints, it is obvious that the types do not fit in one of these categories, even if they sometimes come close to Rotunda or Roman. Our object of study is then a better description of the form, its terms, its contexts, use, reasons of appearance and disappearance. So this is an ongoing study. We try to find out more about its reasons, and we hope it can inspire new typefaces or revivals, of which some we are working on. Well, today, in the given time, we'll focus what happened in the 1460s, which is an important, dense, and surprising decade. Quite suddenly in 59, the Doramas appears with Fustenschöffer. It is the smallest type then, around 14 points, and it's entirely different from their own and Gutenberg types. Lotte Hillinger has pointed out its superior technical quality, lasting like no other type until the end of the century. And this might be due to Nicolas Janson, who is working in the workshop as a spy for the French king, coming from the mint in Paris, where he already worked with punches. As we can see, the Doramas is not a Textura, it's not a Bastarda, it's not a Rotunda, but of course, there are still Gothic features. We find broken modulation, overlapping ligatures, contractions, abbreviations, sometimes decorated capitals, and also a clear horizontal orientation, more wide between the letters and the lines. Typical for the Doramas is an open A, not present in any other Gothic script, and a G looking like the figure 8. We find also straight D in several alternates. The capitals are often neither Gothic nor Roman, but more of uncial nature. Now, on what script was this type modeled? It's a question difficult to answer. It's close to the writing of Petrarca, which can be described as semi-humanistic, which is the meaning of Fere-Humanistica. And the writing is semi-humanistic compared to the contemporary writing, the hand of Poggio Bracciolini. Now we must imagine, we don't have any information, but perhaps out of German tradition, a more Gothic hand was preferred by Schöffer. In Germany, humanism had just begun, but as printers were also publishers, Fustenschöffer had to build up a publishing program and might have been aware of the growing interest. Schöffer was also working before as a calligrapher in Paris, so he might have been in contact with humanism. So a plausible scenario could be that he himself had evolved the script upon the hand of Petrarca and made this type out of it. In 4060, printers start to leave Mainz. A Bible is printed in Bamberg, another in Strasbourg. This is the one in Strasbourg by Mentelin, set in a type similar to the Doramas. It's a bit closer to Bastarda, but not a Textura as it might be expected for a Bible. The Jewish Catholicon might also be printed the same year. It's a Latin grammar and a dictionary, almost twice the text of the Bible. The type is, again, close to the Doramas. As we can see, it is of lower quality and looks blurred, a reason to attribute it to Gutenberg, since Fustenschöffer had their better Doramas. In 61, the king who sent Janson to Mainz dies. And from now on, we don't have any record of Janson. He probably stays in Germany because the son of the king rejects all plans of his father. The next year, a Bible is published by Fustenschöffer in the middle of a bloody fight between two archbishops in Mainz. Many printers among Gutenberg have to leave the city. And now this Bible, since there were already 3 on the market, it is possible that this one was also set in the Doramas type, that it was intended for export in countries demanding for a more humanistic type. A Bible in a Gotico-Antiqua could also mean that it's what is intended for personal or educational lecture. 2 years later, the 2 monks, Weiner and Panatz, make this long trip over the Alps to Subiaco, to this wonderful place in the mountains east of Rome to found a workshop in a monastery. Now, before we look at the Subiaco type, we have to notice that Peter Schöffer will make the first edition of an antique writer, Cicero, printed again with the Doramas type. It's a great success and will be printed again the next year. Now this is the type in Subiaco by Swineman and Panatz, used for Donatus, and the same year also Cicero. It's quite big, around 18 points. And Gaudi has described it as neither blackletter nor Roman, the beginning of Roman type, blackletter in color, but nearly Roman in form. Stanley Morrison went so far to call it the first humanist Roman type. To what Harry Carter has objected, it is humanist, but it's the Germans' idea of Italian humanism. In 1466, more printers settled in Italy. Hahn and Rissinger cut the first Rotunda type in Rome. And the next year, Swineman and Panatz will leave the mountains also to Rome to print more classics. Their first book, again as Cicero, is set in a new type, definitely more Roman than the first one. But for Harry Carter, again, it's nevertheless not fully Roman. It does render a typical inscriptural capital alphabet, but the minuscule letters, though they have been made to harmonize with the capitals, still have the penman's leading in and out curves. Serifs are added strokes, not continuations nor terminal thickenings. And then Carter gives a clear definition of Roman. A Roman type is one that has classical capitals and serifs and the terminals of the straight strokes. Now, if we look more in detail, 3 major steps until now, we can notice that there is a break between Scheffer and Swineman and Panatz. They do not seem to have been modeled on the same scripts. Swineman must have well known the Durandus. He had worked before in the Scheffer workshop. So we found now Roman capitals who make quite suddenly their appearance. They have tiny serifs, as we find them in Poggio's handwriting. And the minuscules, although they have long ascenders and descenders, give still a quite black and compressed image of the type. And then the second type of Swineman and Panatz on the bottom has fully serifed capitals. Notice how long they are. But the minuscules are not really serifed. The type is also overall lighter and much wider than the first. In 68, the year Gutenberg dies, the Durandus style established further in Germany, in Basel, Augsburg, then Nuremberg. And in 69, Germans found in Paris the first French workshop in the Sorbonne University. Another German leaves to Italy, Johannes de Spira, which is the city spire, and will go to Venice. Now, where is Nicolas Janson? If he's not already in Italy, he might have left with Johannes de Spira as an apprentice to Venice. He then might be the author, or has worked at least on this type, first used by Johannes de Spira for an edition of Cicero. Now, if we take the definition of Roman by Carter, consistent serifs on both sides of the stem, here we are. The type is nevertheless not freed of Gothic reminiscences. As you can see, minuscule C and E have broken curves, H is round, and the capitals have inconsistent serifs. They are also huge compared to the minuscules. Finally, a lot will happen in 1470. The first book is published in Paris, Riesinger moves to Naples, Cologne surpasses Mainz, Neumeister prints in Foligno, Reinhardt in Trevi, and the incredible 5-year printing monopole Johannes de Spira had obtained from the Pope in Venice ends with his sudden death. Now, quickly, other printers will publish in Venice, like Christoph Waldaffer and Nicolas Janson. This is the first French type in Paris, clearly less Roman than what we have seen before in Venice. This is the type by Neumeister in Foligno. Here the words of Gaudi resonate well. It's Roman in form, but blackletter in color. This is the type by Waldaffer in Venice, a quite major Roman type. And finally, Janson with his remarkable Roman, sometimes equaled but not surpassed until Aldus 25 years later. Now, it's hard to believe that this is the first type by Janson. He must have worked on types we have seen before. Janson marks an end. But if we compare some glyphs, we can see how lighter, wider, less broken, and written the forms have become. Of course, they do not evolve one directly from another. But we could divide in 3 blocks. The first 3 are Germans, then the 2 Swinehart and Pannertz types, and then the 3 in Venice, which can be regarded as direct influences. While in Italy, everybody will try to rival Janson in Roman and in Gothic. Janson had also beautiful rotundas and printed a lot in Gothic. The Doramas was in Germany from its beginning a reference, well established, appreciated, and often copied. Now, after 1470, a mixing, puzzling occurs with Gotico-Antiqua, and also a few singular hybrids come up. I would quickly show this. For example, Adolphe Rouche, also called the printer of the Air Bizarre, had Roman serifed capitals paired to Gotico-Antiqua minuscules. And there is, by the way, a more Roman type by Rouche, often dated in 67, but this is a date which must be probably wrong. A similar approach with Ludwig-Hohenwang in Augsburg. The caps show often quite free variations, but go the Roman direction, clearly. Now, the fact that the German printers added Roman caps to Gotico-Antiqua minuscules might be the reason to believe that Gotico-Antiqua was in a certain way a proposal for a humanistic type in Germany. And now that real Roman was there, also in Germany, fonts were updated. Interesting is Mentelin, who had many fonts. We can see an evolution in 3 steps. The second type keeps the minuscules from the first, but changes the caps to more Roman. And then the caps stay, and the minuscules get serifs. But not all printers went the Roman direction. As late as in 1480, we find here an example of Gothic caps with Gotico-Antiqua minuscules. And some had both. Perrix in Toulouse had full Gothic and Roman caps, and what is crazy is that within the text, he changed the 2. Finally, there seems to be another approach not made of a process of evolution or puzzling. The types here try to get the best out of the 2 worlds, often in a subtle and beautiful way, like Césaris and Stoll in Paris, here on the left, or Linhart Holle in Ulm on the right. Now, after we have seen all this, it becomes indeed difficult to define what is between Roman and Gothic as a singular form. It could be more interesting to consider what happens in between as 2 extremes as a field of tension. These are the types we have seen today. On the left, we come closer to Gothic, on the right to Roman. You can see that the Rundus on top left is inside the field, and Janson is outside. We can then have Roman tendencies or Gothic reminiscences. We can easily add more references, but naming remains difficult. And finally, a matter of point of view. The Durandus is an important type, perhaps more than any other within this field. Many types refer to it or build upon it. Now, how can we name it? Half Gothic is too vague. Fere-Humanistica belongs better to handwriting. Of the names we have, Gotico-Antiqua is probably the best. It's not an English term, but a German name for a German type makes sense. What happens in Subiaco is also significant. What will become Roman begins here. The Durandus will never evolve to fully Roman, although Schöffer used it until the end of the century. Now, most proto-Romans are Romans with Gothic reminiscences made by German printers in Italy. That means that the printers did probably not put on purpose some Gothic into Roman, but followed more an evolution. And finally, by contrast, some are left, which seems to be more a conscious approach to 2 extremes. And perhaps these are the only ones which we can probably name by hybrid. We could summarize by this. Gotico-Antiqua are not Gothic and not Roman. It's an independent form in Germany. Proto-Romans want to be Roman. Hybrids do not. Thank you very much.